Hello and welcome to today's podcast. Please come and join me and warm yourself up by the fire. Why don't you grab yourself one of your favourite snacks and a favourite drink? Sit down, relax, and listen. Today's story is from the book Dreadful Tales, written by the awesome author Richard Laymon. This story is called The Grab. My old college roomie, Clark Addison, pulled into town at sundown with a pickup truck, a brand new Stetson, and a bad case of cowboy fever. "What kind of nightlife you got in this one-horse town?" he asked, after polishing off a hamburger at my place. "I see by your outfit you don't want another go at the Glass Palace." "This goes out, partner. Where you been?" With that, we piled into his pickup and started scouting for an appropriate watering hole. We passed the 4 blocks of downtown Barnesdale without spotting a single bar that boasted of country music or a mechanical bull. "Guess we're out of luck," I said, trying to sound disappointed. "Never say die," Clark said. At that moment, we bumped over the railroad tracks and Clark punched a forefinger against the windshield. Ahead on the far side of the grain elevator stood a shabby little clapboard joint with a blue neon sign. The Bar None Saloon. Short of a bucket machine, the Bar None had all the trappings needed to warm the heart of any yearning cowpoke. Sawdust heaped on the floor, Burley Haggard on the jukebox, Course on tap, and skin-tight jeans on the lower half of every girl. We moistened up to the bar. "2 calls," Clark said. The bartender tipped back his hat and turned away. When the mugs were full, he pushed them towards us. "That's 180. He leaned against the bar. "What kind of action you got here?" he asked. "We got drinking, dancing, carousing, and the grab." "The grab?" Clark asked. "What's that?" The bartender stroked his handlebar moustache as if giving the matter lots of thought. Then he pointed down the bar at a rectangular metal box. The side, I could see, painted with yellow letters, read, "Test your guts." "What's it do?" Clark asked. "Stick around," the bartender said. With that advice, he moved on. Clark and I wandered over to the metal box. It stood more than 2 feet high, its sides about half as wide as its height. The Grab was painted on its front in sloppy red letters, intended, no doubt, to suggest dripping blood. Its far side was printed with green. "Pay $10 and win." "Wonder what you win," Clark said. I shrugged. Leaning over the bar, I took a peek at the rear of the box. It was outfitted with a pound of hardware and padlocked to the counter. While I checked out the lock, Clark was busy hopping and splashing beer. "No opening on top," he concluded. "The only way in is from the bottom," I said. "It was ever thus," he said, forgetting to be a cowboy. He quickly recovered. "Reckon we ought to grab a couple of fillies and raise some dust." As we started across the room toward a pair of unescorted females, the jukebox stopped. There were a few hushed voices as everyone looked toward the bartender. "Yep," he cried, raising his arms. "It's time. Step on over and face the grab. But let me warn you, this ain't for the faint of heart. It ain't for the weak of stomach. It ain't a roller coaster or a tilt-a-whirl. You get off, laughing, and forget. This is a genuine test of grit, and any that ain't up to it are welcome to Vamoose. Any that stay to watch or participate are honour bound to hold their peace about the doings here tonight. Alf's curse goes on the head of any who spill the beans. I heard Clark laugh softly. A pale girl beside him looked up at Clark as if he were a curiosity. Any that ain't up to it, hit the trail, the bartender said. He lowered his arms and remained silent while two couples headed for the door. When they were gone, he removed a thin chain from around his neck. He held it up all to see. A diamond ring and a small key hung from it. He slid them free and raised the ring. This here's the prize. Give it to your best girl or trade it in for $1,000 if you're man enough to take it. So far, we've got 3 weeks with the grab and not a soul shown the gumption to make the ring his own. Pretty thing, ain't it? Okay, now gather around. Move on in here and haul out your cash, folks. $10 is all it takes. We stepped closer to the metal box at the end of the bar, and several men reached for their wallets, Clark included. You going to do it? I whispered to him. Sure. You don't even know what it is. Can't be that bad. They're all gonna try. Looking around at the others as they took out their money, I saw a few eager faces, some wild grinning ones and several that appeared pale and scared. The bartender used his key to open the padlock at the rear of the metal box. He held up the lock and somebody moaned in the silence. Dull, a woman whispered. She was off to my left, tugging on the elbow of a burly, bearded fellow. He jerked his arm free and sneered at her. Then go ahead, fool, she said, and ran. The muffled thud of her cowboy boots was the only sound in the room. Near the door, she slipped on the sawdust and fell, landed on her rump. A few people laughed. Parents! She yelled as she scurried to her feet. She yanked open the door and slammed it behind her. Girl's got a nervous stomach, Dal said, grinning around at the rest of us. To the bartender he said, Let's get to it, Jerry. Jerry set aside the padlock. He climbed onto the bar and stood over the metal container. Then he raised it. The cover slid slowly upwards, revealing a glass tank like a tall, narrow aquarium. All around me, people gasped and moaned as they saw what lay at the bottom. Barely visible through the grey, murky liquid, a stench of formaldehyde filled my nostrils, and I gagged. Face up at the bottom of the tank was a severed head, its black hair and moustache moving as it stirred by a breeze. Its skin wrinkled and yellow, its eyes wide, its mouth agape, its neck full of ragged pulp. Well, well, Clark muttered. Jerry, kneeling beside the glass tank, picked up a straight, bent coat hanger with one end, turned up slightly to form a hook. He slipped the diamond ring over it. Standing, he lowered the wire into the tank. The ring descended slowly, the brilliance of its diamond a dim glow in a cloudy solution. Then it vanished inside the open mouth. Jerry flicked the hanger a bit and raised it. The ring no longer hung from its hook. I let out a long-held breath and looked at Clark. He was grinning. All you gotta do for that pretty diamond ring is reach down with your hand and take it out of the fellow's mouth. Who'll go first? That's me, said Dale, the bearded one whose girl had just run off. He handed a $10 bill to Jerry, then swung himself onto the bar. Standing over the tank, he unbuttoned his plaid shirt. Let me just say, Jerry continued, nobody's a loser at the Bar None Saloon. Every man with grit enough to try the grab gets a free beer afterwards. Compliments of the house. Throwing down his shirt, Dale knelt beside the tank. Jerry tied a black blindfold over his eyes. All set? Dale nodded. He lowered his head and took a few deep breaths, cycling himself up like a basketball player on the free throw line. Nobody cheered or urged him on. There was dead silence. Swelling out his chest, he held his breath and dipped his right hand into the liquid. It eased lower and lower. A few inches above the face it stopped. The thick fingers wiggled, but touched nothing. The arm reached deeper. The tip of the middle finger stroked the dead man's nose. With a strangled yelp, Dal lurched his arm from the tank, splashing those of us nearby with the smelly fluid. Then he sighed and shook his head, as if disgusted with himself. Good try, Jerry cried, removing the blindfold. Let's give this brave fellow a hand. A few people clapped, most just watched, hands at their sides or in pockets, as Jerry filled a beer mug and gave it to Dal. Try again later, partner. Everyone's welcome to try as often as he likes. It only costs $10. 10 little dollars for a chance at a $1,000 ring. Who's next? Me, called the pale girl beside Clark. Folks, we have us a first. What's your name, young lady? Biff, she said. Beth will be the very first lady ever to try her hand at the grab. Don't do it, whispered a chubby girl nearby. Please. Lay off her. It's not worth it. It's to me, she muttered, and pulled out a $10 bill. She handed her purse to the other girl, then stepped toward the bar. Thank you, Biff, Jerry said, taking her money. She removed her hat and tossed it onto the counter. She was wearing a t-shirt that didn't take it off. Leaning forward, she stared down into the tank. She looked sick. Jerry tied the blindfold in place. All set? He asked. Biff nodded. Her open hand trembled over the surface of the fluid. Then it slipped in, small and pale in the murkness. Slowly, it eased downward. It sank closer and closer to the face, never stopping until her fingertips lit on the forehead. They stayed there, motionless. I glanced up. She was tight and shaking, as if naked in an icy wind. Her fingers moved down the face. One touched an open eye. Flinching away, her hand clutched into a fist. Slowly, her fingers fluttered open. They stretched out, trembled along the sides of the nose, and settled in the moustache. For seconds, they didn't move. The upper lip wasn't visible, as though it had shrunken under the moustache. Biff's thumb slid along the edges of the teeth. Her fingertips moved off the moustache. They pressed against the lower teeth. Biff started to moan. Her fingers trembled off the teeth. They spread open over the gaping mouth and started down. With a shriek, she jerked her hand from the tank. She tugged the blindfold off, face twisted with horror. She shook her hand in the air and gazed at it. She rubbed it on her t-shirt and looked at it again, gasping for air. "Good try," Jerry said. The little lady made a gusty try. Didn't she, folks? A few of the group clapped. She stared out at us, blinking and shaking her head. Then she grabbed her hat, took the complimentary beer, and scurried off the bar. Clark patted her shoulder. "Good going," he said. "Not good enough," she muttered. "Got spooked." "Who'll be next?" Jerry asked. "Yours truly," Clark said, holding up a pair of fives. He winked at me. "It's a kinch," he said, and boosted himself up onto the bar. Grinning, he tipped his hat to the small silent crowd. "I have a little surprise for you all," he said in his thickest cowboy drawl. "You see, folks," he paused and beamed, "not even my best friend Steve knows about this, but I work full-time as a mortician's assistant." That brought a shocked murmur from the audience, including me. "Why, folks, I've handled more dead meat than your corner butcher. This is going to be a pure cinch." With that, he skinned off his shirt and knelt behind the tank. Jerry, looking a bit amused, tied the blindfold over his eyes. "All set? Ready to lose your diamond ring? Give it a try." Clark didn't hesitate. He plunged his arm into the solution and drove his open hand downward. His fingers found the dead man's hair. They patted him on the head. "Howdy, partner," he said. Then his fingers slid over the ghastly face. They tweaked the nose. They plucked the moustache. "Say, ah." He slipped his forefinger deep between the parted teeth, and his scream ripped through the silence as the mouth snapped shut. His hand shot up, a cloud of red behind it. It popped from the surface, spraying us with formaldehyde and blood. Clark jerked the blindfold down and stared at his hand. The forefinger was gone. "My finger!" he shrieked. "My gosh, my finger! It bit it!" Cheers and applause interrupted him, but they weren't for Clark. "Look at him go!" Dal yelled, pointing at the head. "Go, Alf, go!" cried another. "Alf?" I asked Biff. "Alf Packer," she said, without looking away from the head. "The famous Rocky Mountain cannibal." The head seemed to grin as it chewed. I turned to Biff. "You knew?" "Sure. Any wimp will make the grab if he doesn't know. When you know, it takes real guts." "Who's next?" Jerry asked. "Here's a volunteer," Biff called out, clutching my arm. I jerked away from her, but was restrained by half a dozen mutilated hands. "Maybe you'll get lucky," she said. "Alf's a lot more tame after a good meal."